Colorado's Hunger Games approach to vaccine distribution, where a lot of people are left to basically fend for themselves and compete against each other for a limited number of shots, that way of doing business was on full display over the weekend. Near the end of an SCL health vaccination event in Denver, they realized they had some extra doses left over from people who didn't show up for their appointments. So SCL reached out to Jeffco schools to see if they might be able to get a few teachers in there quickly for a vaccination. Jeffco sent a mass email to 14,000 people telling them they had an hour to get to the National Western Complex for a shot. People came racing across town, causing traffic jams. At one point, people were leaving their cars and sprinting for the vaccination site. Our Steve Steger looks at what we might learn from that debacle.
Jeffco schools should have just signed off this email with, "May the odds be ever in your favor." After all, it told 14,000 people that there were 200 doses of COVID-19 vaccine left over at the National Western Complex, and they had an hour to get there. Teachers told us they watched people sprint from cars in gridlock traffic. One told me she was run off the road trying to get there.
We received a mass rush of teachers coming in.
Megan Monkey with SCL Health helped run that clinic, a mass vaccination event for vulnerable communities that had gone well up until then.
Really, we're running extremely smooth with the average patient or vaccine receiver having about a 30-minute turnaround.
Monkey couldn't tell us how many doses were actually left over from the no-shows.
You have constant flux of who shows up early, who shows up late, who doesn't show up.
All day, they'd been calling people 70 plus on their waiting list, trying to get them in. She says when they'd exhausted that, they decided to turn to the next group.
We reached out to our community partners to say, with a very targeted ask of, we have additional vaccine. Can you go to your lists of folks to get additional people here?
By now, Jeffco decided not to go with that targeted approach. After this weekend, SCL says they've learned they have to be specific with partners like school districts.
You really need to have a targeted prioritization list. And so that means taking the list of folks that are interested in getting the vaccine, aligning it with the state guideline, and then really having a very structured communication plan of how do you reach out to those that the vaccine is now available to.
This weekend, Jeffco told its staff that the reason they sent a mass email, they replied all to everyone, was out of an issue of fairness. And now they are going to create a priority list moving forward for these opportunities. Denver Public Schools told me today that they've had a priority list for a while. In fact, Kyle, that's how they're handling all their vaccinations for all of their teachers in different schools, is they're just consulting that priority list.
And because Colorado does not have a cohesive system, it's this patchwork approach, whether the patchwork is various employers, be they school districts or whatever else, whether the patchwork is different hospital providers or doctors' offices or whatever else. People are hugely dependent on the attitude of their organization, whether it's we're going to come up with layers that aren't required of us, or if their methodology is LOL, nothing matters, Hunger Games, go.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, you can't fault an organization for saying, can you get people here to put this shot in arms? Because the goal is always to get this shot out to as many people as possible. But I think a lot of people are hoping that this might be a wake-up call to all of those employers in town who may be in one of these priority categories, like, hey, maybe you should talk to your employees about who wants to get a shot and where they might fall on that list.
Yep. I think that not doing so is actually mean. I want to talk about that here in a second. Thank you, Steve.